The National Electrical Code, specifically Section 358.12, addresses the accessibility of electrical metallic tubing, commonly known as EMT. This section mandates that all electrical equipment must be accessible to qualified personnel after installation, without requiring the removal of permanent building parts or finishes, opening enclosure doors, or accessing equipment doors or covers. It's important to ensure that working spaces are not used for storage, as this can impede access to electrical equipment. If access to other equipment is necessary for maintenance or repair, additional access methods like removable panels or doors should be implemented. Grounding and bonding equipment, including grounding conductors, bonding jumpers, and grounding electrodes, must also be accessible without removing permanent parts of the building or finish. Junction boxes, pull boxes, conduit bodies, and hand-hole enclosures must be installed in a way that the wiring inside can be accessed without removing permanent parts of the building or finish, opening enclosure doors, or accessing equipment doors or covers. However, this requirement does not apply to boxes, conduit bodies, or hand-hole enclosures that are buried underground. Flush-mounted devices should be installed with the opening within 12 inches or 305 mm of the finished floor, unless space limitations prevent compliance, such as in ceilings. Surface-mounted devices should be installed so that the bottom of the device is at least 12 inches or 305 mm from the finished floor, again unless space limitations prevent compliance. Receptacle outlets installed in floors must be located so that no part of the plug or attachment plug is touching the floor surface when fully inserted, with an exception for receptacles mounted on portable floor boxes. Switches must be installed so that the center of the operating handle is at least 48 inches or 1.22 meters from the finished floor, except where space limitations prevent compliance, like in ceilings. Isolated power systems must be accessible for operation and maintenance. Service equipment must be accessible to qualified personnel. The service disconnect must be installed in a readily accessible location, either outside the building or structure or inside, nearest to the point where the service conductors enter. Additional service disconnects are permitted if required by the NEC. If the service equipment is located outside, the disconnect must be operable from a readily accessible location inside or outside the building or structure. Converting from flexible aluminum conduit to EMT often involves junction boxes or conduit bodies to facilitate the transition. Since Section 358.12c stipulates that junction boxes and conduit bodies must be accessible, burying such transitions within a wall would violate this requirement. The underlying principle is that electrical connections and equipment need to be accessible for inspection, maintenance, and repairs without causing damage to the building structure. It's crucial to consult the latest edition of the NEC and local amendments to ensure compliance, as code requirements can change over time. Always prioritize safety and consult with qualified electrical professionals for any complex installations or interpretations of the code. The NEC accessibility requirements are not simply about convenience, they are about ensuring the safety of both qualified electricians and building occupants by allowing for timely and effective maintenance and repairs of electrical systems. By adhering to these codes, potential hazards such as electrical fires and shocks can be minimized. Consider a situation where a transition from flexible aluminum conduit to EMT is made within a wall without providing an accessible junction box. If a fault occurs at this transition point, troubleshooting and repair would necessitate cutting into the wall, potentially damaging the building structure and increasing the time and cost of repair. This inaccessibility not only violates the NEC but also poses a safety risk to anyone attempting to work on the concealed electrical system. Proper planning and adherence to the NEC guidelines during the initial installation phase can prevent these issues, ensuring that electrical systems are both safe and maintainable throughout their lifespan. Furthermore, the accessibility requirements extend beyond just the initial installation. Throughout the life of an electrical system, modifications, additions, and repairs may be needed. If the initial installation does not comply with accessibility requirements, any subsequent work will be complicated and potentially compromise the integrity of the system. For example, if a circuit needs to be extended or rerouted, inaccessible junction boxes or conduit bodies can become major obstacles, requiring extensive demolition and reconstruction to make the necessary connections. In addition to the practical considerations, there are also legal and insurance implications to consider. Non-compliance with the NEC can result in fines, penalties, and even legal action in the event of an electrical incident that causes damage or injury. Insurance companies may also deny claims if it is found that electrical work was not performed in accordance with applicable codes and standards. Therefore, adhering to the NEC accessibility requirements is not only a matter of best practice but also a legal and financial imperative. When planning an electrical installation, it is essential to carefully consider the layout of the wiring and the placement of all components, including junction boxes, conduit bodies, and other enclosures. The goal should be to minimize the number of concealed connections and to ensure that all necessary access points are readily available. This may involve using longer conduit runs, strategically locating junction boxes in accessible areas, or providing access panels in walls or ceilings. In some cases, it may be necessary to deviate from the most direct route in order to comply with accessibility requirements. However, the added effort will be well worth it in the long run, as it will simplify future maintenance and repairs and ensure the safety of the electrical system. The accessibility requirements in Section 358.12 of the NEC are intended to facilitate the safe and efficient operation and maintenance of electrical systems. By adhering to these requirements, electricians and other qualified personnel can quickly and easily access electrical components for inspection, testing, and repair, minimizing downtime and reducing the risk of electrical hazard. It is important to remember that the NEC is not simply a set of rules to be followed blindly, but rather a comprehensive set of guidelines based on years of experience and research. The accessibility requirements are based on the understanding that electrical systems are dynamic and require ongoing maintenance and repair. By providing for easy access to electrical components, the NEC helps to ensure that these systems can be maintained in a safe and reliable condition throughout their lifespan. In conclusion, the requirement that transitions from flexible aluminum conduit to EMT must be accessible and not buried in a wall is a fundamental principle of the NEC, designed to ensure the safety, maintainability, and compliance of electrical systems. By understanding and adhering to this requirement, electricians and other qualified personnel can help to create electrical installations that are both safe and reliable for years to come. To further clarify, consider the specific wording of Section 358.12c regarding boxes, conduit bodies, and handheld enclosures. It explicitly states that these components shall be installed so that the wiring contained in them can be rendered accessible without removing permanent parts of the building or finish of the building. This means that any transition point between different types of conduit, such as from flexible aluminum conduit to EMT, must be housed within an accessible enclosure. Burying this transition directly within a wall, without providing an access panel or other means of reaching the connection, would directly violate this requirement. The term accessible in the context of the NEC has a specific meaning. It means capable of being reached quickly for operation, renewal, or inspections, without requiring those to whom ready access is requisite to climb over or remove obstacles or to resort to portable ladders, and so forth. This definition emphasizes the importance of unobstructed access to electrical components. The accessibility requirements are not intended to be overly burdensome or impractical. The NEC recognizes that there may be situations where it is not possible to comply with the accessibility requirements in their entirety. However, in these cases, the NEC requires that alternative measures be taken to ensure that the electrical system is still safe and maintainable. For example, if a junction box must be located in an inaccessible area, such as above a high ceiling, the NEC may allow the use of a remotely operated disconnect switch to isolate the circuit for maintenance purposes. It's also important to distinguish between accessible and readily accessible. The term readily accessible is defined as capable of being reached quickly for operation, renewal, or inspections, without requiring those to whom ready access is requisite to climb over or remove obstacles or to resort to portable ladders, and so forth. In other words, readily accessible means that the component can be reached without any special tools or equipment. While some electrical components are required to be readily accessible, others are only required to be accessible. This distinction reflects the relative importance of different components and the frequency with which they are likely to require maintenance or repair. For example, service disconnects are typically required to be readily accessible because they may need to be operated quickly in the event of an emergency. On the other hand, junction boxes may only be required to be accessible because they are less likely to require frequent maintenance. In addition to the specific requirements for accessibility, the NEC also includes general requirements for the installation and support of electrical equipment. These requirements are intended to ensure that electrical equipment is installed in a safe and workmanlike manner and that it is adequately supported to prevent damage or injury. For example, the NEC requires that all electrical equipment be securely fastened to a supporting structure and that it be protected from physical damage. It also requires that all wiring be properly supported and that it be protected from abrasion or other damage. When transitioning from flexible aluminum conduit to EMT, it is important to use the proper fittings and connectors. The fittings and connectors must be listed for the intended use and they must be properly installed to ensure a secure and watertight connection. It is also important to use the correct size of conduit and conductors for the application. The size of the conduit and conductors must be adequate to carry the intended load and to prevent overheating. Overheating can damage the insulation on the conductors and can create a fire hazard. In some cases, it may be necessary to direct the ampacity of the conductors due to the ambient temperature or the number of conductors in the conduit. The NEC provides tables and formulas for calculating the correct size of conduit and conductors for various applications. It is important to consult these tables and formulas to ensure that the wiring is properly sized. In addition to the NEC, there may be local codes and regulations that apply to electrical installations. It is important to check with the local authorities to determine what codes and regulations are in effect. Local codes and regulations may be more stringent than the NEC in some cases. It is important to comply with all applicable codes and regulations to ensure that the electrical installation is safe and legal. When in doubt, it is always best to consult with a qualified electrical contractor. A qualified electrical contractor will be familiar with the NEC and local codes and regulations and will be able to ensure that the electrical installation is done properly. Hiring a qualified electrical contractor can help to prevent costly mistakes and can ensure that the electrical installation is safe and reliable.